The Johannesburg Stock Exchange, in collaboration with the Western Cape Department of Economic Development and Tourism, recently announced the results of their 3-year joint SME Capital Matching initiative. This initiative aims to unlock critical funding pathways for SMEs across the province, contributing to the advancement of the region's growth for jobs strategy. I'm joined now by Head of the SME Development at the JSE, Cleola Kunene, to discuss more on the innovative efforts made in the sector. Cleola, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When this partnership launched 3 years ago, what was the primary gap you identified in Western Cape SME ecosystem, and to what extent has this collaboration closed it?
When I look and consider the history of why this was relevant, it's not just a Western Cape reality, but a national reality that finance remains one of the top 5 challenges for small to medium-sized enterprises. In fact, not just access to finance, but the speed of access, the quality of the type of finances, and how much does it actually cost them at the end of the day, as well as the diverse type of funding ranges. Now, if you look at, for instance, just all the way back to 2021, there was only a 37% success rate of companies that applied for funding. And so we were working on an accelerator program where we were scaling companies and identified this as a gap, not just for medium-sized companies, but for small companies. And in 2023, we were able to launch what you would term a pilot and a starting in the Western Cape to really help companies with their funding readiness and then access to capital, which, as you know, now has run for 3 years, and we have a lot of amazing success stories to show for it.
But Cleola, we've seen revenue growth for participating SMEs jump from 3.26 billion rands to 4.54 billion rands. Beyond these numbers, is there any specific story that you can maybe share with us that illustrates that JSE effect?
So I think the story is quite self-evident. One, the story of the number of companies that actually engaged, which was over 1,000 companies. So if it wasn't a gap, we wouldn't have had so many companies that said, one, we want to engage, we want to work with you. Two, I think the other part is that we went across the region, all the way from Saldanha, to George, and in between, and areas even like Athlone, where the JSE has never been in the past. So that in itself also speaks to accessibility. But I think the key areas of measure is one, the number of companies that became funding ready. Yes, we put out a number of 280. If we look at the tangible numbers, more like 640 or number of companies that actually even went on to get funding from other funders. It's not just in terms of capital matching, but also the companies that had success in terms of creating more jobs, based on the capital that they received, but also based on the development support. So we're not just looking at this from a one-dimensional lens that says, were you able to get access to funders faster and more diverse funders? And were you able to raise capital? But how has this helped with the sustainability of your business? And aligned to the Western Cape strategy, how has this helped create more jobs in the province? And those are the tangibles that we look at. If you look at the accelerator side alone, which also we rolled out to more than 7 companies in the Western Cape, those companies have increased jobs by 26.4%. That's not a number that you can just throw around, and it does not align to the economic growth of the country, but certainly is a very high measure of success of a program like this.
And speaking on accessibility and growing that network, you've successfully matched SMEs with a network of 28 active funders. What is the biggest hurdle SMEs face when moving from training to actually signing a funding deal?
I think, sometimes it's the old school things that we don't think matter, like actually putting a face to a business, being able to tell your story. Now, in the digital age, everybody goes online and you have to go through a lengthy application process. And a company can apply to so many, just think of anyone applying to a job. You have to go put in your CV details every single time. So try and imagine that for a small business that doesn't have the capacity, the time, or the necessarily the support to do that for capital raising. Now, this essentially puts them in 4 to 6 different funders that they would never have had access to, and they're able to speak directly to deal makers and decision makers and tell their story. And on the flip side, the funders saying they've never met with SMEs that were so well prepared, hence the funding readiness where they came. They understood exactly what they needed capital for, they understood how much they needed, they understood what they were going to do with the capital, and they were investor ready, which is fundamentally what we've tried to help them do.
And Cleola, just to wrap up, we've seen this model expand to Limpopo, the Free State and the Eastern Cape. What lessons are you taking from the Western Cape as you roll out across South Africa?
I think one of the key lessons that we've learned is go to where the people are. We've taken a very low-key approach where we do it as a tangible roadshow. So we'll go into community halls and take 7 funders to 8 funders to 10 funders with us. We'll go into rural areas and we try and really engage with people multiple times in a meaningful manner. But the most tangible lesson is don't expect people to come to you, go to where they are.
Well, thank you so much, and we hope that we'll continue building these or creating these success stories. And I like that you actually said there that it is a tangible roadshow, but we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That was the JSE Head of SME Development, Cleola Kunene, touching base on the 3-year joint SME Capital Matching initiative and its impact on small businesses.